There is perhaps no greater paradox in history of bodybuilding than Frank Zane. He stood on Olympia's stage with body weight from 185 to 190 pounds. Today, professional bodybuilders weigh anywhere from 250 to 300 pounds on the stage. They possess far more muscle, they are much bigger, they are much stronger, they carry almost 100 pounds more body mass than Frank Zane ever did. And yet, if you ask bodybuilding fans which body they would rather have, Frank Zane's body or the body of modern bodybuilders, millions of fans around the world will choose Frank Zane. Now, how is that possible? How can a man who possessed dramatically less muscle still be considered by many to have built one of the greatest physiques in history of bodybuilding? Was it genetics? Was it aesthetics? Was it proportions? Or did Frank Zane understood something about bodybuilding that modern bodybuilding has forgotten? Perhaps the real question is not who had more muscle, but rather what actually makes a physique beautiful. Today I want to explore why Frank Zane looked better than bodybuilders twice in size, what made his physique so extraordinary, and what natural bodybuilders can still learn from him nearly 50 years later. Modern bodybuilding has simply become obsessed with quantity. We are witnessing that on a daily basis. Just watch any bodybuilding show, professional or amateur, or obviously Mr. Olympia show, and you will see that. So it's size, size, and size. More muscle, they have to eat more food, they are training with heavier weights, they have more body weight like never before, more drugs, more everything. And yet, despite possessing much more mass than anybody in history of bodybuilding, many modern physiques fail to produce the same visual impact as Frank Zane. Now the question is, why is that? And the answer is that the human eye does not judge muscle mass. The human eye judges proportion. Now imagine two paintings. One is huge, maybe 4 or 5 meters by 2-3 meters. And another one is smaller. But the smaller one is more balanced. The bigger one is really badly composed. So which one would appear more beautiful? Clearly the smaller one, which perfectly balanced composition. Frank Zane understood that bodybuilding was not simply accumulation of muscle tissue. He was the best proof of that. Bodybuilding was basically creation of visual harmony for him. When you looked at Frank Zane's body, nothing appeared excessive, nothing appeared out of place. Every body part flowed naturally into other body part. His shoulders complemented his waist. He had big shoulders, wide shoulders, very small waist. His chest complemented his arms, his quads complemented his upper body. Everything simply existed in perfect proportion. And perhaps this is why decades later, millions of fans across the world still admire Frank Zane's physique more than athletes carrying dramatically greater amount of muscle mass. Because bodybuilding was never supposed to be competition to see who can become the largest human being possible. And this is where we actually ended up. It was supposed to be the art of developing human body. So why Frank Zane's physique was so extraordinary? We have to start with genetics, because obviously genetics matters enormously. Frank Zane possessed perhaps one of the most aesthetically gifted structures in bodybuilding. First of all, he had wide clavicles. That matters dramatically. But not just that, he had very small waist, remarkably narrow waist. Also, he had small joints. That obviously contributes greatly to overall impression. He had excellent muscle insertions, exceptional symmetry, and extraordinary balance. And this is actually what creates that illusion in bodybuilding. And this is the most important visual impact that actually pleases one's eye. Because bodybuilding is fundamentally an optical illusion. A man with a broad shoulders and very small waist will always appear larger than a man with the same muscle mass but wider waist. Frank's shoulders to waist ratio was simply extraordinary. His vacuum pose remains one of the greatest poses ever displayed on a bodybuilding stage. Just look at the image. This is simply phenomenal. Nobody came close when it comes to this vacuum pose to Frank Zane. But genetics alone do not explain Frank Zane, because there were many genetically gifted bodybuilders. What made Frank Zane exceptional was that he understood what his genetics were designed to produce. He never attempted to be Sergio Oliva. Sergio Oliva was very different. He had completely different structure and he was much more muscle bound. Also, Frank Zane never attempted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, because Arnold also had very different structure. He was much bigger by structure and also he carried much more muscle. He never attempted to become a power athlete. He simply attempted to become the best Frank Zane. And this is the key. And this is probably the most important lesson that everybody who is watching this video should remember. That you should be the best version of yourself and never try to look like somebody else, because this is not going to happen. Many bodybuilders try to become somebody else. I have many friends, many very successful bodybuilders, very advanced, even professionals, who try to become somebody else. And trying to be somebody else, they basically got injured. They ruined their careers. Instead of continuing to be the best self possible. Frank Zane spent his life becoming Frank Zane. Frank Zane understood what bodybuilding is all about. Most people think that bodybuilding is all about building muscle, but Frank Zane understood that bodybuilding is about creating visual impact. That makes a massive difference in approach. Many bodybuilders train for size. Frank trained for appearance. He simply understood the most important components of bodybuilding. And this is symmetry, shape, balance, illusion, presentation, aesthetics. He understood posing better than anybody else. Just watch Frank Zane posing on the stage. With grace, with precision, with dignity, performing all these poses that actually show the world who is Frank Zane, why Frank Zane is so different, so unique. So he managed to do that. He turned bodybuilding into art, as bodybuilding should have always been. He practiced posing for hours. He understood how to display his physique. He understood that bodybuilding is partly psychology and partly art. And this is where modern bodybuilding has perhaps lost its way. Because modern bodybuilding increasingly resembles an engineering project, like building a house or building a block of flats. Frank Zane approached bodybuilding as artists approach his sculpture. Every muscle had a purpose. Every proportion had meaning. Every line mattered. This is very important. This completely has disappeared from modern bodybuilding. And bodybuilding for him wasn't just physical development. It was simply an artistic development. Perhaps one of the most remarkable things is that actually Frank Zane never chased size. He never chose to be bigger. Imagine that. Imagine a bodybuilder who doesn't want just to be bigger. He wanted to be better, because he understood something that many bodybuilders still struggle to understand, that every pound of muscle does not necessarily improve the physique. Additional muscle can also widen the waist. How many times have you seen bodybuilders with that blocky appearance? Professional bodybuilders, bodybuilders competing on Olympia, having huge waist, looking like a block of concrete on the stage. Frank Zane never wanted that. He understood that to be better does not mean necessarily to be bigger. He also remained lean during the year, and this is another big difference. People today, almost all of these bodybuilders, I mean, I see them every day, they all get fat in the off-season. They're bulking, apparently. Frank Zane avoided excessive bulking. Even in his words, you can watch him on YouTube, when he said 2-3 times he made big mistake because he wanted to try that bulking and see what is going to happen. He said, I paid massive price when I had to prepare for the next show. I was panicking, I was overtraining, I had to dramatically cut my calories, my food, and that contributed to huge stress. That lesson, obviously, everybody should learn from Frank Zane, but unfortunately, modern bodybuilders seem to ignore that completely. So how Frank Zane actually trained? His training philosophy was also very different from what many people imagine. Frank Zane wasn't obsessed with maximal strength. He wasn't obsessed with powerlifting. He wasn't obsessed with performance. He was simply obsessed with muscular stimulation. Although in the beginning he did do some heavy weights and he looked very different. But later on, when he changed and when he became Frank Zane that we know, he simply changed his attitude towards training and he was focusing on creating the perfect body. That obviously came out of his approach to training. His training emphasized, first of all, moderate loads, because only with moderate load you can control every movement, every exercise. You can get yourself into position to sculpt your body. You will start using the weights to create a beautiful body. If the weights are too heavy, as I have explained in so many videos, this will be simply impossible. You will become a mover, a laborer. You will just move weights. You will never use them for higher purpose. Also, he used controlled repetitions. He was targeting the muscle with very strict form and always with that very high mind-muscle connection. He was always focused and aware of everything that is going on. Every rep, every set, every session. He was high-volume trainer. Concentration was very high and also, as I mentioned, precision. He believed that muscle itself had to perform the work, and that means you have to train in perfect form, as he did. He never used momentum, he didn't train the ego, he didn't train with some crazy intensity in order to destroy his nervous system. He was targeting the muscle. He used tremendous amount of concentration. He was also very accurate about eccentric phase of the repetition. He maintained continuous tension. He visualized the muscles working. And this is something that today many people completely ignore, just in order to lift heavier. Frank Zane understood that bodybuilding and strength training are not the same activity. Also, I devoted few videos on that subject. Bodybuilding is not powerlifting. Powerlifting measures performance. Bodybuilding measures muscular development. And these two are not necessarily the same thing. Now, when it comes to his exact training, it's important to say that Frank Zane actually varied his training throughout his career. That is difficult to pinpoint one training system, but for the sake of an argument, to give you a picture, most probable, most likely type of training that he used most of the time, I will explain what Frank Zane preferred to use during the year and before the show. So he would train the whole body in 3 days, and then he would often take day off, and then he would repeat. He would also take day off when he felt that he needs to take a day off. So he preferred to take that pull, legs, push system. So the day one would be usually back, biceps, forearms. Day two would be legs, and day three would be chest, shoulders, and triceps. He trained like this, but he also changed that occasionally. So I'm just giving you an example. Frank Zane was a high-volume trainer. For upper body muscles, major muscle, big muscle groups, he trained anywhere from 15 to 25 sets, but before the show, he would move that number of sets up to 30. Now, smaller muscle groups were always trained with 10 to 20 sets. He often trained abs daily, performing 300 to 500 reps total, spread over a few different exercises. Now, when it comes to legs, Frank Zane trained 15 to 20 sets for quads, 10 to 15 sets for hamstrings, and 12 to 18 sets for calves. So we are talking about 40 to 50 sets overall in the leg workout. So you see, high volume trainer, obviously. Now, when it comes to repetitions, Frank Zane used anywhere from 8 to 12 reps for upper body, major muscle groups, and also for the basic exercises, so 8 to 12 reps. Now, when it comes to isolation work, the reps will be a little bit higher, maybe 10 to 15 reps. For delts and calves, he would do 12 to 20 reps. And abs, as I said, he would do 20 to 50 reps per set. But altogether, he liked to do a lot of reps for abs, maybe 300 to 500 reps in total. So massive, obviously massive ab session. Now, when it comes to legs, he would do anywhere from 10 to 15 reps in the major exercises, but then isolation exercises like leg extensions or lunges, the reps will go up to 20. In overall, he was high volume trainer, high number of sets, high number of reps, and also he would train every muscle probably every 4 to 5 days. But as I said, this is not one and only training system that Frank Zane used. This is just an example, because he used to vary his training throughout the year. Now, why natural bodybuilders should actually train like Frank Zane? First of all, the basic principles that I have explained, focusing on proportionate development, symmetry, staying lean year-round, these are foundations of every intelligent natural bodybuilder. So Frank Zane did that. If you do the same, you will be doing very good. Do you need to train exactly like Frank Zane? Maybe not. Maybe you should not just copy his training system. As you know, I advise that every muscle should be trained once per week. And I explained that in so many videos. I wrote books on that. But I explain in detail everything about the reasons why muscle respond the best when it's trained once per week. For naturals and also for enhanced. But when it comes to Frank Zane attitude towards training, natural bodybuilders should learn from him about consistency, execution, recovery, muscle tension, obviously high volume, high number of sets, high number of reps, mind-muscle connection, controlling reps in every set, and also immaculate precision, meaning training in perfect form. Natural bodybuilders should not chase ego. Unfortunately, many do. I see them daily. They're obsessed with lifting weights because they can obviously progress quickly in lifting heavier weights in few basic exercises, most of the time in wrong form, but anyhow. They're chasing weights, they're pumping their ego, building their ego, but they forget to build muscles. And I see some of them years after years still looking the same. Now there is the lesson that modern bodybuilding still refuses to learn from Frank Zane. Perhaps Frank Zane's greatest contribution to bodybuilding was demonstrating that aesthetics and size are not the same thing. He proved that bigger is not always better, that stronger is not always better, and that heavier is not always better. The purpose of bodybuilding was never to become the biggest guy in the room. The purpose of bodybuilding is to build the best physique possible. And maybe this is why Frank Zane remains so beloved today. Because when people look at Frank Zane, they don't simply see muscles. They see proportions, they see harmony, they see beauty, they see art, and perhaps this is what bodybuilding was always supposed to be. Frank Zane did not possess the most muscle, but he possessed something far more important. He possessed the closest thing bodybuilding has ever produced to physical perfection. And this is why, decades later, millions of bodybuilding fans still believe that Frank Zane looked better than bodybuilders twice his size. After 40 years in bodybuilding, competing 46 times, winning 17 titles, coaching over 3,500 clients, and helping them to get in the best shape of their lives, I have published for you 13 ebooks which are fully loaded with detailed information about everything you always wanted to know about bodybuilding. So if you finally want to start building muscle and burning body fat, click on that link in the comments and you can download my ebooks. I have also published for you the Bodybuilding Blueprint course, in which I personally demonstrate and explain the most effective exercises for all major muscle groups. So if you want to learn how to train in perfect form and stop wasting time in the gym, click on that link in the comments and you can access my Bodybuilding Blueprint course. So guys, if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, send me your comments, and until the next video, I wish you all the best.